Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Thank you so much for joining us on a very busy night of live launch coverage. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at the KSC press site. At the center of your screen is the star of our first bit of live launch coverage today. This is SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket sitting there in the middle of Launch Complex 39A here at KSC. But this is far from the only mission that we have on tap tonight, and not even the only rocket that we have currently out at a launch pad tonight. Taking a look around the Cape, have a very active scene here. Starting from left to right, of course, Falcon Heavy getting ready to launch. See our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. We're T-minus 1 hour, 25 minutes, 53 seconds and counting to lift off of that Falcon Heavy rocket supporting the launch of a military space plane. We'll have much more on that mission, dubbed USSF 52, throughout the evening tonight. Moving to the middle is a Falcon 9 rocket over at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It's set to launch a batch of 23 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. That's coming up just after 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. With those two launches, that'll bring SpaceX up to 93 launches on the year. And last but not least, on the right-hand corner, or the right-hand side of your screen, that box shows a United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket out at Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And during the day tomorrow, ULA President and CEO Tory Bruno says they'll be conducting another wet dress rehearsal after last Friday's tanking test wasn't able to be completed. We'll have more on that later as well. So lots of activity here on Florida Space Coast this week, and in fact just the first couple of days starting off the work week. We've got a whole team of folks helping to make this live launch coverage happen. Starting with our man in the chair, Stephen Young, running the technical side of the broadcasts tonight. Adam Bernstein is manning the tracking cameras here at the press site, getting some launch photos as well. Our Michael Kane helping to support our coverage this evening with our wonderful moderators in the live chat. Just taking a look and see who's with us tonight. I see Stephanie B. Hello to you, Stephanie. I know I've seen a couple of our other mods earlier today as well. So thank you to our full team that helps keep the chat kosher and moving along in a copacetic way. We're also getting support for launch coverage tonight from our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs as well. So we've got the full team out here for very busy night. T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. If you'd like to follow the team helping to make tonight's launch happen, we've got our X handles there up on the screen. Myself, Adam, and Michael, we're all on X, all providing content covering the space program in various capacities. So if you'd like to keep up with what we're doing, we'd love it if you give us a follow there. And good evening to you, Dremwolf, one of our moderators joining us in the live chat as well. Good to see you there. or no, T-minus 1 hour, 21 minutes, 34 seconds ahead of the liftoff of USSF 52, that Falcon Heavy mission, the 5th Falcon Heavy set to launch coming up tonight with a T0 liftoff of 8:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those of you joining us from around the world, that's 0114 UTC, Tuesday morning. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, there's a quick and easy way to do that. For the 3,200 plus of you that are joining us live tonight, first of all, thanks for being with us. If you would be so kind as to hit the like button and share the stream, that would be a great help and allow more folks to find this live coverage and everything else going on with this channel. Naturally, we can't do these broadcasts without the support of our wonderful channel members. So our thanks to some of our newest channel members, Jim Swink joining at the pad leader level, and Darren Cates also joining at the pad leader level there. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to 4K views of all the missions that launch from here at Cape Canaveral, both at KSC and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, as well as access to member-only videos, including the full interview with one of our folks giving us a little more insight into the mission. We'll come up to him very shortly, but just to give you a little bit of a tease, got a full interview surrounding that if you want to dive more into this mission and other happenings with SpaceX and national security launches. That's in our members section as well. We also encourage you to help support the channel. If you'd like to use the YouTube Super Chat function, join in the conversation. If your comments are appropriate to be read during the broadcast, we'd love to read them aloud and share your thoughts or answer some questions as we get closer to liftoff. I want to know one of our channel members, Norman Reitzel, has been a member for 16 months. Appreciate you sticking with us, Norman. He says, greetings from South Texas, Nexar County. Just outside of San Antonio. Good to see you again, Norman. Rick Donner with a $5 super chat, one of our channel members. Thank you so much, Rick. Says, when do you think we'll see the first dual crew launch between 39A and Slick 40 with the new crew tower? That is a good question, and one that's a little bit hard to pin down, although if, as it's expected, the pad is ready in time for the Axiom private astronaut mission to the International Space Station set for January, AX-3, it's expected that they would use that pad and NASA would use Pad 39A to support the Crew 8 mission. And while it's not necessarily a dual launch, as in having both Falcon 9s with two Crew Dragons occupying the pad at the exact same time, it'll be pretty close and closer than we've seen before, with it being just 1 month apart. So we're getting there. We are certainly getting there. Thanks for the question. Mel Roberts Harold with a $5 super chat saying, hey, thanks so much for the coverage tonight. We'll be watching from Chicagoland right along with y'all. Well, thanks for the support, Mel, and it certainly feels a little bit like Chicago today with it being as windy as it is. See the American flag at the press site here that has been whipping back and forth throughout the day. In fact, as we'll talk a little bit more about when we get to the weather, the liftoff winds are the watch item tonight. Come back to new members and channel support in just a moment, but let's continue on with the broadcast. We're T-minus 1 hour, 16 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Coming up now in less than 30 minutes, the launch director will give their go for the startup pound load for tonight's first launch the launch of the Falcon Heavy. As per usual these days, because we're not getting mission audio from SpaceX, we won't hear that call out for the results of the go, no go poll, but we'll rely on our extensive experience with the Falcon missions to guide us through the countdown. SpaceX, of course, is running their mission control operations from their facilities at the Hangar X site at the Roberts Road campus here at KSC. It's where they refurbish the Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as we are seeing with the two side boosters on tonight's mission flying for their 5th time. Lots more on that straight ahead. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, tonight's launch is targeting a T0 liftoff of 8:14 p.m. Eastern, 01:14 UTC. SpaceX has previously stated that there is a 10-minute launch window for this mission, assuming fueling has not yet begun. If for some reason, though, they are unable to launch tonight, they do have a backup opportunity at the same time tomorrow, 8:14. Coming to the weather. As I mentioned, it has been quite windy today. Almost feels like I'm back in Chicago with that lake effect wind. It's not crested more than, say, maybe 65 degrees as the high at most. The weather looked even worse yesterday, which is part of the reason why they stood down, pivoted to tonight's launch opportunity. Heading into this evening's launch window, the 45th Weather Squadron, the meteorologists over at the Cape forecast 75% favorable odds of weather at liftoff, with the primary concern, as I mentioned, being those liftoff winds. As we've been tracking the weather today here at the Cape, we've seen warnings of sustained winds of more than 18 knots. If SpaceX does need to pivot to the backup launch opportunity Tuesday evening, though, the weather does deteriorate just a little bit. It drops down to only 60% favorable odds, with an additional constraint, that being thick clouds. Again, that's tomorrow night. We haven't seen a lot of cloud activity around the Cape today, so that's certainly playing in SpaceX's favor tonight. Taking a quick peek at the live chat, want to thank Janine Delasera, one of our wonderful channel members, for a $3 super chat. Thank you so much, Janine. No message there, but a big-eyed corgi, looks like. The My Hero one. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you supporting us, Janine. And we have 3 new channel members, or I guess 2 new channel members, and Ward Spose, who's been a channel member for a month at the pad leader level. Thank you so much, Ward. Says simply, light that candle. And potentially it will be the first of 2 candles being lit tonight. Thank you so much, Ward. Appreciate you supporting the channel. As well as Daniel's Weather Space Station joining us at the pad leader level. And Dave Krupel joining us at the mission specialist level. Appreciate you both. Glad to have you aboard. Now T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes, 6 seconds, and counting. Tonight's launch will be the 3rd in just over a year for Falcon Heavy as far as being used on a national security space launch program mission. The side booster supporting tonight's mission, flying for a 5th time tonight. Not the original plan for these boosters, as this launch was supposed to happen over the summer. but because of a delay in this mission, there were a couple of missions that jumped ahead on these boosters' flights. Those were launched for EchoStar as well as NASA's Psyche spacecraft. We'll delve a little bit more into the booster history in just a bit. But first, we want to talk about the reuse of these side boosters in general. On Friday, we had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Walt Lauderdale. He's the mission director and lead for Falcon Systems and Operations at Space Systems Command, which is a part of the U.S. Space Force. He says when it comes to flying these boosters again, there's far more to it, though, than just the sheer number of launches. We appreciate talking with him recently. This is Dr. Walt Lauderdale.
When SpaceX originally did their qualification baseline, it was for 10 flights. They now, with all this experience, have continued to push the envelope, pushing it up, as you said, toward 20. What benefit we've had is we don't want to be the fleet leader, but all that extra data and all the additional work that SpaceX has done to allow themselves to push the launch cadence up and the number of launches, we're able to take advantage of all that data and begin to increase the number of flight counts that we would be comfortable with. I think we talked the last time, there's an evaluation not just at the booster level. People always look at the booster count, but it's really about each individual component, the engines, the plumbing, not just the structure. And what does that all see? How many flights? What is its qualification? What is its flight history? And we're taking advantage of all that information together with SpaceX to have confidence for our missions. I think the best way of characterizing is we might have slightly different risk tolerance given the nature of our business. We don't have insurance, so we have to make sure that those precious payloads get to orbit safely. There's no real replacement. I don't have a business case I can make for the capabilities they provide. But that working with SpaceX allows us to leverage their commercial cadence, particularly with the Starlink, to push the envelope. All that data gives us confidence as to how far we too can push up our reuse count. Again, that all ties into, your question is a great follow-on to the last one. It gives us the increased flexibility with whatever rockets they have in their stable, ready to support their missions. If we have moves, we now have confidence that we have a range of flight history that we can take advantage of to make sure we deliver on time.
And our thanks again to Dr. Walt Lauderdale for that little bit of insight. And as he alluded to a previous question that I had posed to him, that is part of our larger conversation. Again, that full interview is available right now on the channel for our members. So if you're a channel member, either in between this mission and the Starlink one tonight, or if you want to put this on mute and go over and watch that maybe in the background on a separate tab, and go ahead and listen to that conversation as we continue the countdown towards liftoff of this particular mission, USSF 52. It was a great conversation. We talked about not only the partnership with SpaceX and the U.S. Space Systems Command from a national security perspective on the missions that they have on deck right now. We also talked about the upcoming Phase 3 procurement. Got a little bit into that, sort of what they're looking for, some of the things that SpaceX will be needing to do, including vertical integration capabilities, which will be coming to Launch Complex 39A in the future. That is one of the requirements for national security missions. And Dr. Lauderdale mentioned that is still a requirement for SpaceX, so look for that additional capability to come online here at Launch Complex 39A down the road, and much more in that conversation. So again, that full interview available right now to our channel members. Channel members like Josh King, supporting us with a $20 super chat donation. Really appreciate that generosity, Josh. Says, let's see a doubleheader tonight. Scrub is not an option. Go Falcon Heavy, go Falcon 9. Well, we certainly are hopeful that a scrub is not in the outlook tonight. We'll keep our fingers crossed that the weather and the winds cooperate for both missions. Also want to thank Rollery7 for a $5 super chat. Says, consider adding trajectory as a bug by the clock. We do get asked about trajectory quite often. It's an interesting idea. We'll we'll look to see if that might be possible. We'll talk after this launch and see what may be possible. We do usually go through the trajectory for each of the missions, but we'll explore, see if that may be something that's possible or reasonable. So thanks for the suggestion, Rollery, and we'll look into that. And thanks for the support. Thanks also to Mike Dizdek for a $2 super chat, joining us from Titusville. This is Titusville checking in. And with a mostly clear night, you should have a good view from Titusville. So thanks for supporting us on the way to liftoff. And finally, for now, we have a new member joining us, Robert Nichols, joining us at the mission specialist level. Welcome aboard, Robert. Glad to have you with us. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 5 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. As we get closer to liftoff, let's go ahead and step through the fueling timeline for this Falcon Heavy mission. This is starting to get more familiar to all of us, as this is the 5th Falcon Heavy of the year, and there will be increasingly more of these over time. Hopefully things work out and we get a daylight launch of a Falcon Heavy soon, but we'll enjoy them as they come. As I mentioned, things start with the go, no go poll from the launch director. That comes up at T-minus 53 minutes. If that go ahead is given, then propellant load starts at T-minus 50 minutes. The loading of kerosene into the first stage of the Falcon Heavy rocket. It's followed up 5 minutes later at T-minus 45 minutes when LOX loading, or liquid oxygen, is flowed aboard the first stage. T-minus 35 minutes, second stage, RP1 loading. That's that rocket-grade kerosene that starts flowing onto the second stage of the Falcon Heavy. At T-minus 18.5 minutes, LOX starts loading onto the second stage of the Falcon Heavy as well. But before that, as with the Falcon 9 rocket, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back as the feed lines are chilled along the transporter erector. That should happen at about T-minus 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Then at T-minus 7 minutes, same with the Falcon 9, chill down of the 27 Merlin engines gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and it protects the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence from the Falcon 9 rocket. I should note, because this is a customer mission, we'll be getting mission audio starting at about 15 minutes out. So as we get into these final events, you'll hear us pause as we are listening into the mission audio along with you. We'll try not to talk over those call-outs as they come, so that you can hear them, we can hear them, and any other pertinent information coming from SpaceX as well. Going back to that strong back retract sequence, when that begins at 4.5 minutes from liftoff, reclines to an angle of about 1.5 degrees, just a slight lean back from the Falcon Heavy rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon Heavy off the pad. The final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon Heavy's onboard flight computers. 45 seconds out, the launch director will give the go for launch. And at T-minus 20, the propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. The launch director will give their go for liftoff, and the engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. If all 9 engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the hold down commands to release the rocket at T0. excuse me, the enter ignition sequence kicks on at T-minus 6 seconds. T0 currently targeting 8:14 p.m. Eastern tonight. Now currently T-minus 1 hour, 24 minutes, or excuse me, 1 hour, 1 minute, 20 seconds and counting. We're now T minus 55 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Less than 6 minutes away from the start of propellant load, if SpaceX is ready to give the go-ahead for that. So, our current countdown clock, we have T minus 53 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. However, we're learning that SpaceX may be pushing this launch back to the end of their 10-minute window. We are standing by for further confirmation of that. And once we do have that fully validated, we will adjust our countdown clock to match that. And we do now have confirmation that the launch time has now shifted. We are making our adjustments to our on-screen countdown clock, but we are now T minus 1 hour, 3 minutes and counting to the liftoff of the USSF 52 mission. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX did have a 10-minute launch window for tonight's operation, assuming they had not started fueling. Fueling has not yet begun, and so they are pushing to the end of that 10-minute launch window today. We have not gotten a full explanation for the pivot to the end of the window. We are still seeing some very blustery conditions, so we can't say with 100% certainty that it is wind related. Liftoff winds were a watch item tonight and are certainly still being considered. We'll continue to bring you updates on the mission as they come as far as the liftoff time. But again, that new T0 has been adjusted. We are now T minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 48 seconds and counting. The new T0 is 8:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 01:24 UTC, for the launch of the USSF 52 mission using the SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket. as we approach the 1 hour mark of the new T0. Again, that's 8:24 for those who may not have been with us just a moment ago. SpaceX sliding to the end of a 10-minute launch window that they have for this mission. On board is a very important spacecraft. It is the X-37B spaceplane. You see there on the left-hand side of your screen before it was encapsulated in the payload fairings to sit atop the rocket that you see there in the live image on the right. This will be the 7th time that this Boeing-built X-37B spaceplane has flown. The last time it launched was back in 2020. It returned for a nighttime landing here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center back in November of 2022 after spending more than 900 days on orbit. Each of these missions has increased in length, duration. The spaceplane is capable of landing not just here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, but also at Vandenberg Space Force Base. It was Vandenberg Air Force Base at the time that it landed, though. This program is overseen by the U.S. Air Force in coordination with the U.S. Space Systems Command. This will be the 2nd time that the space plane is flying on a SpaceX vehicle. The first time was on board a Falcon 9 on the 5th flight. The X-37B is known as an orbital test vehicle, so its mission names are OTV and then the number of flight that it is. So on OTV 5, it flew aboard a Falcon 9 rocket. This is OTV 7, launching aboard a Falcon Heavy. The other 5 times it flew were on ULA rockets, the Atlas V in a 501 configuration. Not a lot is disclosed about these missions as they are military operations for national security purposes. But we do know there is at least one NASA payload on board, the SEEDS-2 experiment, which will be sending a number of seeds to be studied, seeing the effects of long-term space radiation on them. Then they'll be brought back and studied by researchers here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center as well as a couple of other sites around the U.S. It's an important step as we continue toward long-duration space exploration. We need to know the impacts to various types of crops as growing fresh food on orbit and in transit to destinations like, say, the Moon or Mars or farther into space in the years to come will be very important. So NASA looking for the variety of opportunities it has to learn more about the impacts of radiation on seeds. Of course, there have been plenty of plant experiments on the International Space Station in the past and continuing on, and this is another way that they are able to test that out. This, of course, being an uncrewed spacecraft. If you'd like to read more about some of the previous items that have flown or payloads that have flown on board the X-37B, including a test of space-based solar power, it's on our website right now, spaceflightnow.com. Now T-minus 53 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. We're now a couple of minutes into the point in which SpaceX would be starting fueling, if in fact they are going for the launch attempt at the end of the window. And they have just posted that they are, as we previously reported, targeting 8:24 p.m. for tonight's launch. They note that weather is 85% favorable. They did not explicitly mention fueling, but the fact that they just posted that update moments ago suggests that that may in fact be the case. So we will keep an eye out for signs of the starting of fueling. Again, that begins with RP1 on the first stage. That'll be coming up at T-minus 50 minutes, followed by LOX loading on the boosters at T-minus 45 minutes. Want to welcome a couple of new channel members, both GM and George Camuñas, for joining us at the pad leader level. Really appreciate that from the two of you. And one of our pre-existing channel members, Artemis, with an extraordinarily generous $100 super chat. Really, really appreciate that, Artemis. That is exceedingly kind, with a bit of a joke in his comment there, or their comment. Talking about the X-37B, says, I hope it's testing a new warp encabulator. Can't wait to leave this planet. Evening, everyone. Good evening to you, Artemis. And thank you again so much for the generous support. Taking a tour up the Falcon Heavy rocket from our friend Pete Carson's tracking camera there. As I mentioned, inside is the X-37B, a military space plane flying for the 7th time in program history. There are 2 operational X-37B space planes that they are able to call upon. Vehicle 1 flew on OTV-1, OTV-3, and OTV-6. The vehicle flying tonight has flown on missions 2, 4, 5, and now 7. So this one last flew aboard SpaceX Falcon 9 Block 4 rocket. It was on orbit for just a little shy of 780 days. 779 days, 17 hours, 51 minutes. After launching from here at KSC. And landing here as well. T-minus 49 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Loading of RP1. Should have begun less than a minute or so ago. Earlier, we brought you part of our conversation with Walt Lauderdale with Space Systems Command. We also had the opportunity to speak with Charles Galbraith. He is one of the senior fellows of space studies at the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies in Washington, D.C. Before he retired a year ago, He served in the U.S. Air Force and then subsequently the Space Force out in California. He also worked on the precursor to the X-37B, the X-40. Part of our conversation talked about the maturation of this technology and its importance. So here's part of our conversation with Charles Galbraith.
Like any technology effort, you start with some baby steps and then you end up walking and eventually running. And I think we're at the running stage now with the X-37. Certainly the X-40 and the airdrops and just proving that can have an aerodynamic landing and recovery was the first step. Demonstrating that we could launch it, it can perform its mission and then return, and then we can recycle that and do it again. And then over the years, as we've seen, the duration of that mission continuing to expand and expand. And now with this most recent launch, we're going to a new orbital regime.
And our thanks to Charles with the Mitchell Institute for his time and insight. You can read more of our conversation in our preview article leading up to this mission. That's, again, on our website, spaceflightnow.com. And it appears we do have a scrub tonight. It appears though the countdown clock has stopped. We're waiting for a confirmation from SpaceX or U.S. Space Systems Command, but it appears that at least the first of two planned launches for tonight, the Falcon Heavy, will not lift off as intended. As we mentioned, liftoff winds were a concern coming into tonight. Just taking a peek out the window, the American flag still blowing quite vigorously here near the countdown clock at the press site. SpaceX did have a fairly short window for tonight's mission at just 10 minutes. It appears as though SpaceX, unfortunately, will not be able to launch tonight. As the countdown clock has stopped, it appears a scrub is in effect. The backup window for SpaceX and this mission is coming up tomorrow night, same time, 8:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1:14 UTC. We are currently standing by for official word from SpaceX, but again, it is our understanding that they have scrubbed tonight's launch attempt for the Falcon Heavy rocket launching the USSF 52 mission. the next available launch attempt for this rocket and this mission is on the books for Tuesday evening at 8:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 01:14 UTC. We're awaiting word from either SpaceX or U.S. Space Systems Command to confirm that they are in fact targeting that backup time. So we'll go ahead and stay with you until we hear that official update. In the meantime, taking a look at the live chat, really appreciate the folks that were supporting our coverage tonight. Chris Stallings with a $5 super chat says, "Go Falcon Heavy," and a little bit of a disappointment in that comment coming in before we had a word of the scrub tonight, as was Artemis's $5 super chat, saying, "Tell you what, if the chat can raise another $100 in support, I'll match it," which is a very kind gesture, Artemis. Really appreciate that. Unfortunately, we are not going to see a launch from the Falcon Heavy tonight, but certainly hope that we'll see you the next time Falcon Heavy launches, or assuming that the Starlink launch is still a go-ahead in a few hours. Love to see you back there then. Steve Frazier with a $10 super chat. Also before we got word that there was a scrub, saying "Go Flight." Thank you for the support, Steven. And our newest channel member, Dan Johnson, joining at the mission specialist level. Really appreciate that support, Dan. And these super chat donations and channel membership help us to do what we do here at Spaceflight Now, support our team, but also push us closer towards increasing our technical capabilities. One of the things that we're striving towards is being able to provide live launch coverage in 4K for all the missions here at the Cape. And we do have word now from SpaceX. They say they are, quote, "standing down from tonight's Falcon Heavy launch due to a ground side issue. Vehicle and payload remain healthy. Team is resetting for the next launch opportunity of the USSF 52 mission, which is no earlier than tomorrow night." Again, SpaceX points to SpaceX says there is a ground issue with the Falcon Heavy, and the X-37B spaceplane are both healthy and in good condition. They note that they're targeting another launch opportunity, they say, which is no earlier than tomorrow night. Of course, we'll keep tabs to see if they do in fact go for that launch opportunity tomorrow night. So be sure to follow our social media. We're on Threads as well as X and Facebook for launch updates on this particular mission. So as we mentioned, SpaceX standing down from the launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket tonight. However, this was not the only operation that was on their dance card. They were also planning the launch of a Starlink mission, sending up 23 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit using their Falcon 9 rocket you see there in the live picture at the center of your screen, that middle box. As of right now, SpaceX is still stating on their website that launch of this mission is targeting liftoff tonight at 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time, with backup opportunities available until 3 a.m. Eastern. We are also working to learn if they are in fact going to continue on with the Starlink launch tonight, or if the scrub of the Falcon Heavy mission will also have a knock-on effect of pushing back the Starlink launch to a later date. We are working to get that information, and as soon as we have that, we will pass that along to you. Of course, the other box there on the right-hand side of your screen, ULA's Vulcan rocket, still set for its wet dress rehearsal, take 2, after it was unable to complete its wet dress due to ground systems issues as well on their side. So unfortunately, it's been between Friday and today, just an issue with ground systems kind of across the board here. First with ULA with their first tanking test on Friday, and now with SpaceX on their Falcon Heavy launch. Teams there, of course, are working to save the vehicle as they are going to go in and do the work that they need to do and look at the next possible launch attempt that they can for the Falcon Heavy vehicle. Again, their phrasing is that it will be no earlier than tomorrow night. We'll have to wait and see if that is in fact their plan and their go-ahead. I want to thank Mel Roberts Harold for a $5 super chat. It says, even though tonight was a no-go, sure appreciate you all that are part of Spaceflight Now, for being at the ready. And we are more than happy to be at the ready, as these missions are important to cover, and we love doing that and bringing you information and real-time reporting. As soon as we learn things, we will update you in our audience so you can bring you along for the ride as well. As one of our main objectives here at Spaceflight Now, to not only bring you live launch pictures and coverage of the space program from tip to tail, but also to do thorough reporting and bring you breaking news as it happens, as was unfortunately the case with the scrub tonight. as we are winding down our coverage for the Falcon Heavy launch attempt tonight. We do have one more launch scheduled on the books, as I mentioned. It's the box in the middle of your screen, the Falcon 9, standing by ready to send up 23 Starlink satellites. Point of note, though, on that, when it came to the last Heavy that launched, that was for NASA's Psyche spacecraft going out to a Metal Ridge asteroid of the same name that launched just a couple months ago, back in October. NASA has a standing agreement with SpaceX that when they have a mission for them and a Starlink mission that is running fairly close by as far as schedule is concerned, the Starlink will come behind the NASA payload. So, for example, Psyche launched, and then it was the turn of the Starlink mission that came shortly thereafter. I believe it was actually later that day, if I recall correctly. So we don't know if there is a standing agreement like that between U.S. Space Systems Command and SpaceX, all of which is to say we are working to learn if the Falcon 9 with the Starlink mission will in fact stand down because the Falcon Heavy scrubbed, or if SpaceX will be going for that launch tonight. Assuming SpaceX does in fact go for the Falcon 9 launch tonight of the Starlink 6-34 mission. This is the countdown clock for that. So assuming that the Starlink mission is still in fact on tonight, this is the countdown clock for that. Stands at T-minus 3 hours, 9 minutes, 37 seconds. The opening of the launch window is 11:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs till just about 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, or exactly 3 a.m. on Tuesday, December 12th Eastern Time. Again, like with the Falcon Heavy, that launch window is not purely elastic. It's only if SpaceX does not start fueling that they are able to push back later into the window as needed. This will be the third flight for this particular Falcon 9 booster. Fairly young for SpaceX's fleet. It has only launched the Crew 7 mission and CRS-29, both flying this year, both with Dragon spacecraft that headed up to the International Space Station. In fact, the Dragon for the CRS-29 mission set to return not too long from now, I believe. Later this month is when it should undock from the station and splash down off the coast of Florida. And some of the science on board will be recovered and sent back out to the researchers who need it. As we continue on through the countdown towards the Starlink mission, we'll be sure to keep you apprised of any updates that come our way where this mission is concerned. We'll jump into Launchpad Live for those updates, as well as post them on social media, primarily X, formerly known as Twitter. And speaking of that, we are getting word that the Starlink mission may also be scrubbed as well. We're waiting for confirmation from SpaceX, but that is what we are hearing at this point in time. And of course, we will keep you updated once we do get official confirmation of that. But again, this is gone from a potential double-header launch day down to a potential no launch day for SpaceX, as it appears that both the Falcon Heavy and Falcon 9 launches are standing down until at least tomorrow. Again, we are waiting for official word from SpaceX on the Falcon 9 launch, but we do have official confirmation from SpaceX on the Falcon Heavy that they are standing down tonight, as we've previously reported. I want to briefly thank Marcus Hurt for a $5 super chat. This is on our way to Haiti on the Symphony of Seas. I don't recall. I think that one may sail out of Port Canaveral, but I don't have their full ship list on the top of my head. But I think Symphony of Seas sails from Port Canaveral. It says, was hoping to see the launch out here in the middle of the ocean. Hopefully Falcon 9 tonight. Love the channel. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. Unfortunately, it sounds like the Falcon 9 will not be joining you out in the ocean tonight either. But we are, again, waiting for official word from SpaceX on that. But we are hearing that the Falcon 9 for the Starlink launch. And while we are still waiting for confirmation from SpaceX, we are getting word from the Brevard County Emergency Management Office. Brevard County, for those not familiar with Florida, is the county in which surrounds Cape Canaveral and NASA's Kennedy Space Center. They say, quote, "We have deactivated our launch operations support team after scrubbed launches of the SpaceX Falcon Heavy and Falcon 9 rockets." So there you have it from Brevard EOC. Some good folks. Talked to them a number of times about various operations. They're actually in the process of expanding their office to handle more of the capabilities that are needed from them, as they are one of the busiest EOCs, not just in Florida, but in the whole United States, in no small part because of the launch operations that happen here at the Cape and their work to support those. So a tip of a hat to Brevard EOC. We appreciate the assisted confirmation in the scrub tonight. And with that, we are officially without either the Falcon Heavy or the Falcon 9 launches tonight. But again, tomorrow, still potentially a very busy day, as we will wait word from SpaceX if they are going to be targeting the launch of the Falcon Heavy tomorrow, if they are able to take advantage of that backup opportunity. If that is the case, we may also see the Falcon 9 launch tomorrow night as well. So be sure to keep tabs on our social media, X, as well as Threads and Facebook, for launch updates as they come. But to start off tomorrow, one thing we do know that is still on the books, on the far right-hand side, the ULA Vulcan rocket set for a tanking test, a wet dress rehearsal, after Friday's WTR wasn't able to be completed due to some ground system issues. ULA's president CEO Tory Bruno noting on social media that because they want to get through a full wet dress rehearsal, that is why the rocket is back out at the pad, and they are doing that test tomorrow. It also means that the Christmas Eve launch, he says, is, quote, likely off the books. They have a 3-day launch window at the end of this month for their maiden flight of the Vulcan rocket, sending Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander on its way to the moon. That window is the 24th, 25th, 26th. And if that is unable to be achieved, as is quite possibly the case with this delay, their next launch window opens up in January on the 8th. Tory Bruno says it is about a 4-day window. And one of the payloads on board the Peregrine lander, a small lunar rover that was built by students up at Carnegie Mellon, noted that the window for Peregrine runs from January 8th through the 11th, which lines up with the 4-day opportunity that Tory Bruno noted on social media. So that is likely when Peregrine will launch on board Vulcan, is in that, I believe this is the second week of January. Should set up a very busy time for missions to the moon, as Intuitive Machines also looking to launch its first mission on the Nova C lander using a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Going to go from the pad that you see there on the far left, Launch Complex 39A. So potentially, if all stays on schedule, we could have, or the new schedule as it may stand, we may have Vulcan launching on anywhere from the 8th to the 11th, and a Falcon 9 with Intuitive Machines launching anywhere from the 12th or the next few days thereafter. And that Nova C lander set to touch down just about a week later. I believe the 19th is its target landing date. Followed by the SLIM lander built by JAXA, Japan's space agency. And we are TBD now on when Astrobotic's lunar lander Peregrine will touch down on the moon, but the moon is a hot destination these days, so a lot of activity coming up. All of that begins with the next fueling test set for tomorrow. So keep up to date with that by following us on our social media for that as well. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for this evening, as we are now bereft of launch opportunities for both the Falcon Heavy and the Falcon 9. I want to thank all of you for spending part of your Monday with us. We wish you could have brought you a launch tonight, but unfortunately that was just not in the cards. Do want to thank our friends Chuck Briggs and Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions for standing by for support of tonight's launch. Of course, Michael Kane and Adam Bernstein for being right at the ready as always. Again, if you're not following them on X, you should. When we do have our next launch, be sure to keep an eye on their social medias for launch pictures from them, as they do have cameras set ready for remote opportunities for whenever this mission launches. Our Stephen Young, of course, running all the technical support and keeping this ship afloat and moving steadily forward. And we will naturally be back with you for live launch coverage whenever these missions are ready, and for all the missions that launch from here at Cape Canaveral. But for now, I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. Be good to yourself be good to others. Sorry there wasn't a launch this time. We hope to bring you one next time. And we will see you next time. Good night.